Welcome everyone um, to our webinar on sharing some secrets around what do effective leaders actually do. Because if you've done any research or if you work in a leadership development space, you'll know that there are tomes and tomes of information out there. If you go on Amazon, there's like more than 30,000 books on the topic of leadership. Some of them, though, are really theoretical based, and I'm going to share with you some theory today. But what we like to do is talk about, well, how can I put that theory into action? How could I actually do some things differently by having a look at myself first, but also just by understanding what are the steps that leaders actually need to tread on in order to be effective. So hopefully that's going to be super useful for you. I love this stuff. We'd ordinarily deliver this kind of content across a half day to a full day. So I am going to race through it a little bit. We're not going to stop and dive in as deep as I would like to, just purely because of the time, and we want to give you a bit of a showcase today. So everyone happy?
Mhm.
Let's assume we are. Great. Okay. So straight away I'm giving away all my secrets, because here is what we've determined to be the 4-step process for leadership. So it intentionally starts at the bottom and it's a build process. So it begins with visioning, we move then into a mobilizing phase, then into developing, and then into enabling. And I'm going to share with you kind of what we mean by those words that all end in ing. And notice that they do end in ing, so they're active words, requires action at each of these stages. And we must start at the bottom, which I think, if you've ever been a new leader in a team, sometimes we inherit teams, don't we? And we inherit kind of where that team is at. And I think what some leaders may forget to do or neglect to do is to begin at the beginning and to go right back to visioning as a leader. So let's start there and kind of look at, well, what do we mean by visioning for leaders and managers in the workplace? And we got a lovely quote here from Joel Barker around vision without action is merely a dream. Action without vision just passes the time. But vision with action can change the world. And I'm sure you can think of some really visionary leaders that either you know, or ones that you've looked up to. So perhaps more celebrity type leaders, people that we've heard of, that have a big vision, and everything they do is rooted back to that vision. And it's really easy, isn't it, to kind of think of some of those inspiring leaders. I mean, if you want to pop some in the chat, pop them in the chat for me. Like, who inspires you as a visionary leader? Um, I personally love a bit of what Steve Jobs used to do in the world. He had a really big vision. He made it really simple, but he made it happen. And I think it's really easy when we see people like Steve Jobs to kind of go, yeah, of course, leaders need to be visionary, but line managers need to be visionary too. The most basic of supervisors need to be visionary for and with their teams as well, because if the team don't understand the vision, they don't understand the direction in which the team is going, what can they get behind? How can they feel motivated to kind of contribute? So it's a big and easy step to kind of go, yeah, well, that's quite ethereal. That's something that leaders do. Actually, managers need to pay attention to visioning within their teams. And we've broken that down into kind of 3 key steps that we think leaders need to do as part of that visioning process. So let's assume we are leading or managing a team for the first time and we're walking into a new building to kind of work with these individuals. We want to be able to think about, well, where is this team now? Where are we now? What's the current status? And to do some analysis in whatever way you're comfortable around looking at, well, what's the current state of things for this team? We also then need to think about, well, where do we want to go? What do we want to change this team into, if there's any change required, or how grounded in the kind of targets or the direction of travel is this team? And we might need to spend quite a lot of time listening and working out that before we go in all guns blazing with our, oh, this is kind of what I want to change up. And I think, again, listening and going slow at the beginning can be a step that's easily overstepped or easily overlooked by some managers. And lastly, and possibly most importantly, at the visioning stage for leaders, is this idea of being mindful and intentional about their personal style. And that's one of the ones that's most important to us here at Blue Gnu, is kind of, how do we take a good hard look in the mirror, but a good hard look in the right mirror, because we know some mirrors are really flattering, they make us look really good, and other mirrors perhaps don't so much. And we want to look in that mirror, right? We want to look in the one that doesn't show us our best side. We want to be really aware of what our strengths are, but also maybe what our weaknesses could be. Thanks, Jonathan, for popping Nelson in the thing. I mean, what a visionary leader. And he just stuck to that vision, didn't he, while he was being like persecuted, just like he stuck with it. He knew what he was there for. So with that idea of being mindful and intentional about personal style, I want to share another thing that we would potentially use on one of our workshops, which is this kind of range of styles. And I think, again, many leaders and managers can often choose a style by accident because they're probably not looking in the mirror. And what we know is some managers might choose to be towards the left hand of this scale, where they might think, well, actually, it's my job to kind of be quite aloof and to not really get close to my team because I'm here to manage. And when the going gets tough, I might need to make some tricky decisions. So some people will intentionally choose a more aloof or hostile style, and they might want to be a bit more remote than kind of buddying up with the team. We also know, especially when we use a language of preference, that some managers will want to be friendly with their team. That's their natural style. They will want to be friendly and really quite close to the people that they work with because, hey, we spend a lot of time at work. You know, some of us are really motivated by meaningful relationships in the workplace, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it's something that leaders need to pay attention to in terms of, am I falling too much one way or too much the other way? And how do I stay in a safe zone? How do I stay remote enough that people can trust me and they know I've got their backs and they know I'll be there for them, but approachable enough that I'm liked and I'm warm and I'm seen as someone that people can come to with the things that are troubling them. And it's a really delicate balance. And again, we see it. And if you came to the last leadership webinar that we ran in June, we talked about a support and challenge metric, like how much a manager's supporting or challenging their team. And this is kind of similar, but more about personal style. So we don't want to be too hostile. Otherwise, we're walking into a danger zone where people might feel quite intimidated by us. They might feel like we're not there for them and that there'll be a huge lack of trust. We don't want that. We want people to feel like they can come and share their issues with us. But also, we don't want to get too friendly with them on the other extreme. We don't want to be so friendly that it might be intrusive or that we start to trip over their personal life. We also don't want to then feel like we might be making unfair decisions if we're too friendly with our team members. So it's a point to kind of ask yourself, really, when you manage others, do you intentionally choose how you want to show up? Or sometimes is it a bit of a happy accident? Or sometimes might you be accidentally straying into one zone or the other with your own leadership style when leading your team or the people that you work alongside? Point for reflection. Welcome to those of you that have just joined us. So visioning is also a bit more about that. It's more than that, rather. It's about kind of setting out your stall for your team. Might take some time to do that, an awful lot of learning, an awful lot of reflection in order to get there. But I think this might be the missing thing that a lot of leaders might forget to do at step one, to forget to not only analyze the job and the metrics of where the team are going, actually to analyze, well, how do I show up in the context of this team and what would be appropriate? So questions, comments, observations from those of you in the room? Like, what do you think so far? Is any of that unreasonable or surprising? Or is it just a jolly good reminder?
So, Elaine, if I could just comment, we got a new country manager when I was back in South Africa, and their approach was to be very, very friendly with everybody. So they arrived for a conference and they made a point of knowing and getting to know every single person and remembered all their names.
Yeah.
But you could see that their whole style was not true to their genuine way of being. So they were this friendly buddy style, but you knew that they were more fiery red. So by their
Yeah.
very way of how they were, they would be more aloof and remote. So it was
Yeah.
fine when we were performing, but when the performance went haywire,
Yeah.
they came down on people to the point that people no longer trusted them because they all thought this was a real earth green person, warm, friendly, approachable, but they actually, in their true style, were fiery red. And it meant that people no longer trusted him because they felt that he wasn't genuine and he had turned up as one person but was actually another. So it created
Yeah.
a lot of confusion in people's minds.
Yeah, and we see that so much with leaders and managers because they're almost coming at a new role with such force, but they're trying really hard, and it raises an authenticity question, doesn't it, around how much are they showing us their authentic selves. So I guess the point of this scale is to ask those questions of authentically, where would I show up and how do I make sure, because when we introduce any kind of new technique or any kind of self-awareness thing, how do I make sure that I don't swing from one end to the other? Because if we experience that swing, whether it's from fiery red to earth green in terms of our preferences, or whether it's from being highly supportive one minute to highly challenging the next, people get really concerned with those kind of pendulum swings. So we want to stay in a safe zone, which this kind of graphic encourages us to do. So no extreme swings, but somewhere where we can get both of those things going on. John, were you going to add something? You came off mute.
Yeah. Well, hello again. The I think it's very interesting, and I would echo what Jonathan says, is that I think this does come down to being genuine and authentic about who you are as a leader. And when I say leader, I don't mean just the person at the top. I mean, we're all leaders at various times.
Yeah.
And if you are having to alter your natural behavior to be overly friendly and be a buddy and love everyone up, people can spot that hypocrisy immediately.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't work.
Yeah.
But it is interesting because I would challenge you a little bit, I think, on saying that there's some danger in the kind of like the buddy zone, because I think if you are naturally and authentically very friendly and loving and caring and giving, I think that's okay. It doesn't mean that you still can't make tough decisions, and you do when you're in charge of an organization, but there are certainly ways that you can do that within a caring framework. But I think it's a great graphic, and well, it has already sparked some thought in my head and conversation. So that's half the challenge over.
I totally agree with you in terms of that. Sometimes it's okay to be buddy buddy, but I think it's when that pendulum swung a bit too far, because if we can still have that tough conversation, then great, but that probably means the pendulum hasn't swung as far out. It's when, I certainly used to have to coach myself on my way to work in my last job as a leader for a corporation that wasn't my own. And I used to have to sit on the train every morning and just remind myself, Elaine, these people are not your friends. These people are not your friends, because my natural disposition was to go in on a Monday and tell them everything that had happened in my life over the weekend, because that's just my sunshine yellow persona. I just had to remind myself, they don't need to know this stuff. These people are not my best friends. They're my team, and they deserve my respect, and they definitely deserve my friendship. But I don't have to tell them everything. So it's all about balance and kind of fine tuning your own approach. So yeah, but I totally agree with your challenge, because my natural disposition to be really nice to everybody. And hopefully my team would back me up on that when they hear me say that. So let's move on from visioning. So we've got 4 steps to cover. There's lots of stuff in all of them, and hopefully again we'll keep pushing away at your thoughts. The next step on the ladder is this step of mobilizing. And I like to think of it either in like a troops kind of way, we've got our team, we understand our team, we understand where we're going, where we've been, we've done a bit of analysis about our own personal style as a supervisor, manager, or leader. All those words I think are interchangeable. But we've got to pay attention to what Jim Collins said in his book Good to Great several decades ago now. But we need to make sure we've got the right people on the bus, that we get the wrong people off the bus, and that we get the right people in the right seats. Because if we've got our best driver sitting in the back of the bus, probably not in the best place in terms of high performance for this team. So the way we've broken down the mobilizing step into kind of the three key areas that we think a leader, manager, supervisor should be responsible for is being able to align the team to the vision. So to get them to understand, if I say we're all going north, can we all close our eyes and point north and it be in the same direction? Do we all actually know? We might be able to say it, but can we do it? And there's a big difference, that saying, doing, gap. So we need to be able to align our team to that vision. Along the way, we're going to have to address performance. And this is one of the areas where I think not having a pendulum swing too far on step one really helps, because there are going to be difficult conversations along the way. And this needs to happen in the mobilizing phase. We can't get to high performance without addressing some of the performance problems that are likely to happen along the way. And it's about this analogy of keeping everyone on the bus, keeping people happy and motivated. So I think motivation happens at the mobilizing stage, and making sure everyone's in the right seats. So do we need to do a little bit of tweaking or changing within our team to make sure we maximize and harness not only performance, but behaviors and motivation to keep those levels high? So I'm going to show you my next slide, and then I'm going to ask a question. Because what we often see in teams is that, we see potentially this graphic on the left. So we know what the vision is. As a leader, we might have done loads and loads of work around orienting the team to the vision, but then in practice, our talents and resources seem to be running around like headless chickens, all facing in a different direction. Can they actually point? There's a few of them pointing in the right direction there, but not all of them. So we're not doing the best that we could be doing of orientating everyone in the right direction towards our vision. What we want to be able to do is to have everyone almost less consciously, like in their subconscious, know where we're headed as a team, and therefore we're all pushing in that right direction. It's really easy to say, it's really hard to do, to get people pushing in the same direction. The tips I gave you before about aligning to vision, addressing performance, and getting the right people on the bus are going to help you. But what do you think about that one? What do you think about mobilizing as a step?
Can I make a comment?
Yeah.
I loved your bus analogy.
Not mine, it's Jim Collins's, but thank you.
I'm going to give you credit for it.
Okay.
I think there's a step before that. I think it's actually having the right bus turn up in the first place. You can imagine, imagine a couple of people at the bus stop. One party animal, desperate to get to Vegas. The other one, very boring, loves playing bridge. I don't know, wants to go to a bridge competition. If they get on the wrong bus, they're never going to find the right seat. And I think that is so important, that actually if you can design your bus to suit your values and personality as a business, you will find that actually the right customers get on, or client employees get on the bus in the first place. And you have to be very, very clear about where you're going.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah.
And I'd add to that and say sometimes you might have inherited someone else's bus, and it might not be the brand or style of bus that you wanted or intended. So sometimes this step to get to where we're trying to head to, which is high performance, this step can be one of the hardest ones if you have inherited someone else's teams, which is, it's quite common that people get promoted out of a team. Then we have, I might get promoted from my team to be the leader, and then all of a sudden there's a dynamic shift, which again we have to go back to visioning. Well, I'm a new leader now. How's things going to be around here with me here? Have I listened to my team about what they want? And there's been a power shift. So I definitely need to spend quite a lot of time in visioning. I also need to spend some time in mobilizing, looking at how do I make sure this delicate shift takes place in a way that works for all of us, and not too buddy, but where we can have clear, explicit conversations about performance and about what's required. So yeah, I agree with you. Let's talk about the bus, because is it the right brand? Is it the right model? Is it got the right sat nav in there? Because the sat nav is kind of coming from vision. Okay. All right, so then we get to step 3, developing. And I've stolen a quote from Richard Branson here. So developing is the next step up. So now we're on the 3rd step. We've done an awful lot of hard work here, and you can't touch on all these steps in a couple of days. Like, it can take many, many months to guide a team and a leader through these steps. But Branson famously said, well, we want to train people well enough so that they could leave, but we want to treat them well enough that they stay and work here. And I think that's huge in the realms of motivation, which is, we've got another webinar coming up about motivation in a few weeks' time. But developing is the 3rd step. Now, it's well worth saying that within the steps, you'd have noticed from my early graphic, this yellow line wasn't there. It's coming in now, because you simply cannot progress to developing until you've got the foundations of visioning and mobilizing in place. However, some Some people have a preference to get to the developing and enabling stages early. So they might accidentally kind of skip over some of the necessary steps in pursuit of the style that they like. And I can speak for myself there, because I have a natural preference in wanting to get to developing, because this is kind of my sweet spot as a leader. I love having the opportunity to motivate and inspire others. I love flexing my style and flexing the skills and strengths of my team to get done what we need to get done around here. And I have got my eye on continuous improvement. But if I don't have those first steps grounded really well, if my team don't know where we're going, and if I haven't got the right people in the right seats along the way, it's going to be really bumpy along the next part. So we've sort of added, if this were like a 4-tiered cake, we've added a nice little bit of yellow buttercream here around, don't get onto step 3, even if it is your preference, even if, like me, you love it, without having had some of the more challenging work, potentially, if it's not your preference, at the lower end of our cakey model. So it's a nice stopgap to kind of go, can I get to that yet? Am I at a place where my team are ready to be developed? Are we now looking at beginning to empower those people and get those individuals to start running the team a little bit, or whatever it might be, so that we do innovate and we do get where we need to go as a team? So I think, yeah, there's some clues you can look out for as a leader and manager to know when you're here, because if these things aren't in place, you won't be able to progress to developing. So what we need to look for is high levels of trust. So do people trust the leader? Do people trust each other? Because if we've done visioning and mobilizing well, trust will be high. As a manager and leader, and if you came to the webinar that we ran in June, we would have talked about reinforcement theory, which is catching people doing the right thing. If we're consistently catching people doing and saying the right things, we're able to push them up to developing. If we're still having to have performance conversations with individuals, it's probably a bit too early to move towards developing. So we need to be consistently catching our team members doing the right things. And then that will lead to, of course, the outcome of that is that there will be consistent and good performance. So we're not necessarily at high performance yet. We're at consistent and good performance within the team. And we should have those kind of metrics to help us measure and understand, are we ready to take our team to the next level and to begin to develop them and their individuals, but also develop our team to improve things are around how things are around here. And I'm wondering if I've got another slide. No, I don't. So any comments, questions on developing before I move it on to the last step, which is enabling? Everyone happy? No challenges, John? I'm looking forward to, I feel like you're my little...
No,
come
no.
Come on.
No, love that. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And no offense intended, of course, it's all in good jest. So the last step on our 4-step model is enabling. So this is where I think as leaders we get to do our best work, because this is about enabling the team to be the best versions of themselves. Again, we simply cannot get there if we haven't done our visioning, our mobilizing and our developing phases. So it's very much the kind of pinnacle of where we want to be. I've stolen this quote from Theodore Roosevelt, and he said, the best executive is the one who has enough sense to pick good people to do what needs to be done, and the self-restraint from meddling with them whilst they do it. And I just think that's great. Like, let's just employ these great people and then get out of their way. And that is very much the spirit of this enabling step. So this is all about empowering your team to be successful, to have appropriate levels of challenge and support, which of course you would have had all the way throughout. But enabling doesn't mean we leave them there. Enabling doesn't mean, oh great, I've done my job here. Enabling means consistently providing both challenge and support, because we know that inspires peak performance. And then we've got this analogy here, oiling the cogs, and I'm going to talk more about that in a second, because for me, to be the oiler of the cogs is the utopia of leadership and management. So let me talk a bit more about that. I've got another quote here, but we don't know the origin of this quote, so I can't line it to somebody. But it's a beautiful quote in my opinion. Real power comes by empowering others. No person can be a great leader unless they take genuine joy in the successes of those under and around them. The beauty of empowering others is that your own power is not diminished in the process. And I think, dare I say, speaking provocatively for a moment, that some leaders don't believe that. Some leaders believe that actually by offering empowerment to others, that my own power may become diminished, and they behave as such. And we start to see that. And to Jonathan's point, when we were talking about visioning, we begin to see really quickly the leaders that can't handle it here, because they don't want to offer true empowerment. They don't want to offer the best parts of their own job, the responsibilities that they really like and enjoy, to their high performing team members, which can be, the team can spot it. Well, that should be really be coming to me, but someone else is hanging on to that. It's interesting. So I mentioned oiling the cogs, and this is kind of one of my favorite analogies when I'm talking to groups of leaders. It's really common when we work with organizations and we get to work with leaders at all levels, that a lot of leaders still place themselves, or managers perhaps, place themselves in the center of everything. So they might be right in the middle of all of those things that it says on that chart there. So ops or meetings, finance, sales, whatever their job is, whatever their team are doing, a lot of managers, either intentionally or unintentionally, we don't really know until we speak to them properly, are placing themselves at the very center of everything. And that's because probably they were really good at it before, and they've been promoted to a place where now they're managing it or leading it, or there's just got a lot of comfort there because I enjoy this job. So I enjoy getting involved. I enjoy, pulling my sleeves up and getting involved with the team. Or I might even accidentally say some things like, well, if you work on that, great, and then give it to me and I'll ratify it, and then we'll take it from there. Not the most inspiring comment to receive, but most managers are placing themselves here. What we want to see is actually the manager almost completely removing themselves from the middle of everything, and actually to become the person who makes sure the cogs are turning. So metaphorically, whatever it might be, we're able to oil the cogs, we're able to be the connecting material that makes sure all the cogs work effectively together. But we're not in there as a cog ourselves. We are the enabler of the cogs and how they turn. And if we can be humble enough to get out of people's way and let them do the work and offer them the parts of the job that are the most rewarding, because we know they've got this, we know they're fantastic performers, everything gets better in teams. Trust improves, authenticity improves, enablement improves, performance goes up, and managers go, wow, look at this. I'm actually not in the middle of everything anymore, and I'm able to watch my team succeed and to promote them and promote their success whilst they're doing it. This is one of my most favorite things. The question is, how do you do it? It's easy to say, hard to do. We teach that on our leadership programs. But I'm curious, what comments do you have about that? Enabling, I think, is really tough to get to. It's not easy. We don't spend a lot of time there.
Yeah, I completely agree with this. And I've been saying for 20 years that a good leader should almost do nothing. And it's not that they don't do anything, they actually do a heck of a lot, but it's not the regular type work that people think earns money. And actually, I've fallen foul to this personally myself. I ran an architect's business. I became an enabling leader, so I didn't do any more architecture. And in fact, actually, that gave me a lot of free time to think about the future of the business and plan strategically. But there were other, what shall I say?
Enabled leaders,
less enabled leaders on the board of directors who were like, you should be doing some work, John, and we should be charging out your time. And that led to a disagreement and an eventual split. So, but you're absolutely right. It's not a hard place to get to, but I think it's a hard place to kind of keep justifying, because of course you can do very little but have an amazingly successful team. But then if it seems like you're doing very little, people are like, well, you've just become an overhead, which is, I think, exactly what a leader should be. But it can lead to some interesting conversations.
Yeah, and a lot of that will depend on the culture of the organisation and the
of course
business. But yeah, it's really interesting. Thanks, John. And what I'll put the full cake up, because now we've looked at the whole cake. So this is like the 4 tiers of the 4-step process. It's oversimplified, and I've run through it very, very quickly today. Like I said at the beginning of the call, it would ordinarily take us at least a half day to a full day to get leaders to kind of really do some analysis of where am I, where's my comfortable place. Like if I had to allocate my time to right now, where I spend my time as a manager or leader, am I overplaying one of these stages? What we know about teams and people as well is that there's always change. So even if we are right up there at enabling, something will happen in our team or in our organization that kind of forces us to go back down the ladder a little bit. So we then might have to completely go back to visioning and start again. Or we might be at different stages for different people. So there might be that I've got a couple of members of my team who I can lead and manage from a developing and an enabling standpoint. But if I've got a brand new starter who doesn't know how things work around here, I'm probably going to be needing to amend my style to them to be right back in that visioning stage, and maybe even mobilizing. And that might actually bring everyone back down a bit to go, look, we've got a new team member. Let's work out together how the vision around here changes with the new aspect, the new individual. So it's not that we kind of get there and we can go tick, move on. We might go up and down. We might go up a couple of stages and come down again. And we're probably at a different stage for different people within our team, because there's one thing I feel I've learned about leadership over the last 20 years. It's that one style does not fit all, and I cannot lead every single member of my team in the same way. And I would expect no leaders that I work for or that I work alongside to develop their skills and abilities to be kind of stuck in a style. It's like we need to change ourselves to get the best out of other people. If we really are the oil, I like to think of DJs as well. If we really, I might be spinning the decks, but I'm not a deck myself. And if I'm doing that effectively, then I'm really aware of all the different speeds my decks are turning at. So what are your thoughts, comments, reflections? Anyone? Love to hear kind of if you've picked up a couple of nuggets, or if that's made you think slightly differently, either about yourself or someone else that you work with. Love to hear a couple of reflections before we close the call, if that's okay.
If I could say something, I think the visioning piece is quite interesting, because as you said, the visions change and people always, the communication is so important around that visioning. Because as much as you feel that you've communicated a vision, you'd be surprised that people still don't necessarily understand it or have a slightly different interpretation of that vision. And I think that in itself can cause, when you said you look about, well, why is it people are in different directions? It's exactly that causes people to go in directions. I've also worked in organizations where the vision just hasn't been clear. And that's just caused a lot of confusion.
It does. It causes the most confusion. And what I'd say, just to reflect back exactly what you're saying, Paulette, is that when we get called into organizations, sometimes we get called in because there's a bit of an emergency, we need to kind of tidy up some leadership behaviors, or we need to kind of respond to a situation that's happened. And when we go in and do that diagnostic work about, okay, what's happened here? What's the root cause? I would say that majority of the problems, and obviously I'm generalizing across a lot of clients and a lot of experience, I would say generally speaking, most problems in most teams are caused by a lack of effort or attention at the visioning stage, because people fail to come far enough to it. They might come back a little bit, but we often don't go far back enough to understand root cause, to really listen to what's going on in our team and really understand how we can change direction in order to move forward. So yeah, I totally agree with you in terms of it's a phase that can be easily skipped over. Oh yeah, we did our vision in like 2010. We probably need to look at vision daily. Like, are we all aligned to vision? Do we spend enough time there? Thank you. Anyone else with any comments or reflections, something that's hit you like a train in the face that you liked?
For me, Elaine, what's interesting is, especially when you get a new CEO in a very big global company, they can develop a new vision which is very different to what was originally there. And their big risk is getting the buy-in of the very senior managers, because they're not going to willingly get off a bus. They're going to hold on to that seat very firmly. And it's very difficult to catch them out and get them to move. And it's only when they either learn to accept the vision or move on that the organization can move on because of the impact they have on the organization. So what you find is the low down levels of the organization are inspired by the vision, buy into it, the behaviors and the culture. But as you move up through the organization, you've got higher and higher resistance. And you've got this very senior leader group that are very difficult to replace. And that's why that bus step becomes so critical for those CEOs. If they really believe in that vision, they have to have the courage to get the right people on the bus in the right seat.
They do. They have to have an awful lot of courage. I was actually chatting to a client who will remain anonymous, of course, but chatting to a client this week, which kind of, you've just sparked that thought in my head, Jonathan. They actually have a CEO who's not new, but he's quite, in their words, not mine, old school. And the team below that individual desperately want to make change, desperately want to realign the vision, desperately want to develop their leaders and kind of set out a new stall for how things are going to be around here. The CEO simply isn't behind it, and I've said to them, I'd love to work with you, but that's where the conversation needs to start. Like, I don't want to come and charge you any money for any work with your leaders, because we'll be talking about some wonderful theories, but if the CEO is not behind it, there's very little point. So you're right, that kind of synergy at a senior level is so important, and often actually kind of overlooked, because it could be at that level a bit of my way or the highway. And that also can be damaging, because you could lose some amazing talent there. So I love it. I love these conversations about leadership. It's tricky, but it's brilliant. Okay, so before we close the call, because we're right nearly at the end, I mean, I didn't really need a slide that said questions, but I'll throw it out there. Are there any questions? Is there anything that I've said that you're unsure about, or that you'd like to challenge me on? Because it's a conversation. I'd love to hear it. So please either come off mute if you're comfortable, or drop it in the chat if you'd rather. Just let that little tumbleweed roll through for a moment.
For me, Elaine, the other thing was that oiling the cogs. It also reminds me of always having to have a helicopter view.
Yeah.
Because by having that helicopter view, you can work out where the cogs need oiling and where you really need to go and give your attention.
Yeah, exactly. It's getting out of our own way. What we tend to say, we don't tend to say helicopter, although I do like it. I might steal that. We tend to say like taking a balcony view. So getting off the dance floor, so that I can see. If I'm on the dance floor, I can't really see where the rhythm is being lost. But if I'm on the balcony and I'm looking at the dance floor, then I can see that a bit better. So that's another nice. I love analogies. I'm full of them, full of these analogies. Okay, anything else from anyone else before I just do a little quick summary? No, we're all good, amazing. So we always do a little offer at the end of a webinar, because we like you guys, we want to work with you. So we thought it'd be really nice to offer a 1-hour leadership coaching call, if you're up for it, to diagnose your leadership strengths in the 4-step process with either myself or a senior member of my team. So if you wanted that would normally cost you about 500 quid, but because you're here on the webinar today, or if you're watching the recording, we're offering that to you for £250 plus VAT. It's a webinar only offer though, so it will expire probably before the end of this month. So if that's of interest, reach out to probably Claire, who's on the call, so claire@blueganuco.com. And if that's not of interest, that's absolutely fine. Our intention today is just to share with you some of our tips and tricks, so that you can perhaps include them for yourself. We've also got 3 other up and coming webinars that you may or may not be interested in joining us around. We've got one about motivation. I mentioned that's a real hobby horse of mine. I love the topic of motivation and talking about how do we get to peak motivation. So that's in a couple of weeks' time. There's another one that I'll be doing with my colleague Stephen on the 9th of October, all around coaching, and we'll be trying to do some live coaching within that workshop. So that will be super fun. And then we've got an insights discovery webinar, which for many of you will know that's kind of our bread and butter here at Blue Gnu. I'm running one of those in the middle of October. So if you're interested in any of those, you can scan that QR code, or if you reach out to Claire, she can point you in the right direction for signing up. We'd love to see you. And what you'll notice is all our webinars kind of build on each other. So I've referred to a couple we've run before. All of them kind of create this amazing knowledge build. So you can actually attend all of our free webinars and get an awful lot out of us. So please do that if you wish. And And then that's it. That's all from me. Thanks so much for coming today. I'm on time, Claire. That's got to be the first time I've ever not run over. So I'm definitely getting better at running these sessions. If you don't already follow our LinkedIn page, please do. The QR code is right there. We share quite a lot of content on there that we hope is useful and meaningful for you, because we want to make the world a better place for leaders and managers.